Elizabeth Ciders, the mother of 16 children accused of hiding her children and causing them serious harm, wants out of jail. But the prosecutor says Elizabeth should stay put. I'll tell you all of the reasons why. I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. Elizabeth Ciders has been in jail since June 30th, going on 2 months now. And she wants out. Who wouldn't? Elizabeth's attorney has asked the judge to modify her bail, but the prosecutor has now responded in writing, and William Archer is essentially saying, not so fast, judge. Keep her in. And his reasons for that are interesting, to say the very least. I'm going to go through all of this for you. Elizabeth's husband, Gary Ciders Jr., and her mother-in-law, Christina Ciders, are still in jail too. Christina Ciders' lawyer has also asked that she be released on bail. Gary Ciders Sr. is out of jail on a signature bond. The 73-year-old grandfather was released from jail because he has a serious medical condition. And since he was in jail, the county would have been responsible for his medical bills. And the prosecutor said those medical bills could have caused the county to go bankrupt. That's how poor Vinton County is. One inmate's medical bills could have sent the county into a financial tailspin. But right now, the county is responsible for the care of Elizabeth Ciders, the mother of the 16 children, her husband, Gary Jr., and her mother-in-law, Christina Ciders.
She cowered, shoulders rounded, head down, not even handcuffed like the rest of her own family. And the second you see that image, you already know what I'm about to say. Something happened inside that house that goes way beyond what anyone's told us yet. I need you to stay with me here, because this case just cracked open in a way nobody expected. Elizabeth Ciders, mother of 16 children, sitting in a Vinton County jail cell since June 30th, going on 2 months now. Her lawyer asked the judge to let her out. Simple request. Happens every day in courtrooms across this country. But the prosecutor, a man named William Archer, just put something in writing that changes everything about how we should be looking at this family. He said no. And not just no. He gave 3 reasons. Reasons that, once you hear them, you'll understand why this isn't just another custody case buried in a small rural county nobody's ever heard of. Here's the thing, though. Her husband, Gary Ciders Jr., and her mother-in-law, Christina, are still locked up right alongside her. But the grandfather, Gary Sr., 73 years old, he's out. Signature bond. Because he's got a serious medical condition, and the county straight up admitted they couldn't afford his medical bills if he stayed behind bars. 1 inmate. 1 old man's health care. Enough to threaten to bankrupt an entire county. Sit with that for a second. That's not a plot from a courtroom drama. That's real. That's Vinton County, Ohio, in the year 2026. Now look at Elizabeth's booking photo again. Go find it if you haven't seen it. Every other adult in that family was cuffed. She wasn't. And her body language in that footage doesn't look like a woman running from justice. It looks like a woman who's terrified of something. Or someone.
In the booking video of Elizabeth from June 30th, she was noticeably the only Ciders family member who wasn't handcuffed. Just looking at her, her body language appeared to be much different from her husband's and her in-laws. She cowered. Her shoulders were rounded, and she was practically hunched over. She seemed scared. This, coupled with how Elizabeth appeared in court and in her booking photo, and the fact that she had 18 children over about 18 years, made people wonder and question whether Elizabeth was the victim of something nefarious. When asked by a local TV station whether Elizabeth Ciders was a victim, her lawyer, Tommy Stolley, said Elizabeth didn't consider herself a victim, but he was still looking into that possibility.
That's the unlikely part of this story nobody's talking about enough. Because when her own attorney was asked point blank whether Elizabeth was a victim in all this, he didn't say no. He said she doesn't consider herself one, but he was still looking into it. Read between those lines. A defense lawyer doesn't say that about a client unless there's something worth looking into. And when reporters asked the prosecutor the same question, he didn't deny it either. He just said, according to her own attorney, she's not a victim, so he'd let that stand for now. That's not a closed door. That's a man leaving himself room to walk back through it later.
William Archer also said that Elizabeth is a potential risk to the victims in this case. Now, these potential victims, the 16 children ranging in age from age 18 to 1.5, They're all in therapeutic foster care. So there, you would hope that, she's not going to be able to learn their location since she is accused of endangering the children. But this is interesting to me that the a prosecutor thinks she's a potential risk to their safety after her lawyer, Tommy Stolley, has said publicly, like, she wants to be reunited with her children. She loves her children. She's getting care packages at the jail and she's asking, can I give this stuff to my kids? So it sounds to me like there's a lot here under the surface that we don't know about. When you read between the lines of this, what does it say to you?
Well, I think just by virtue of the fact that she is suggesting she wants reunited with the children, that should she be released, that she might make a effort to have contact with them. Obviously, the placements for the children would not be known, but given the whole very bizarre circumstances surrounding this case, they probably have a concern that she might try and find out where the children are.
So which is it? Is Elizabeth Ciders the architect of what happened to 16 children inside that house? Or is she one more casualty of it, just wearing the label of defendant instead of victim because that's easier for the system to process? We don't know yet. But here's what we do know, and this is where it gets interesting. Prosecutor Archer filed a memorandum, a real document, sitting in a real court file right now, opposing any change to Elizabeth's bond. And in it, he laid out 3 arguments. The first 2, you'd expect. She's facing multiple second-degree felony child endangering charges, so she's a flight risk. Her lawyers filed a competency motion, so there are questions about her mental state that need answering before she goes anywhere. But it's the third reason that should stop you cold. Archer wrote that Elizabeth Ciders has new, serious felony charges coming. Charges that haven't even been filed yet. Charges that are headed to a grand jury. New charges, on top of 16 counts of child endangering that are already on the books. What could that even be? Sit with that question for a second, because I don't think you're going to like where your mind goes. 16 children. Years of alleged neglect. A prosecutor who's choosing his words carefully enough in an official court filing to say more is coming without saying what it is. That's not an accident. That's a man building a case brick by brick, and he just showed his hand a little bit before he meant to.
When asked by a local TV station whether Elizabeth Ciders was a victim, her lawyer, Tommy Stolley, said Elizabeth didn't consider herself a victim, but he was still looking into that possibility. Here's what Prosecutor William Archer said when asked whether Elizabeth was a victim at a press conference back on July 8th.
According to her attorney, she's not a victim. So we'll let him decide how he wants to address his representation of her.
So it doesn't appear at this point that William Archer's opinion has changed because he has formally objected to any modification of Elizabeth's bond as it stands right now. Archer wrote in a memorandum opposing the request for bail modification, this court should deny the bond modification for several reasons. First, the defendant is facing multiple serious pending charges, multiple F2s involving serious physical harm to her children, and thus is a flight risk and a potential risk to the victims in this case. Second, the defendant has filed a competency motion. Consequently, she is at personal risk until her competency is known. Third, the defendant has new serious felony charges that will be considered by the grand jury. Did you catch that last part? William Archer wrote that Elizabeth Ciders has new serious felony charges that will be considered by the grand jury. That sounds like those charges are in addition to the 16 child endangering charges she already faces.
Here's where I want to slow down for a second, because this isn't just a headline to me. I've read through hundreds of these filings for this channel, and most of them, you can feel the distance in the language. This one doesn't read that way. 16 kids, one on the older end of 18, one barely a toddler, all pulled out of a single home on the same day and placed into what's called therapeutic foster care. That's not standard placement. That's the label the state uses when the trauma is severe enough that regular foster care isn't considered adequate. Whatever was happening inside those walls for years, and by all accounts, this went on for years, not weeks, not months. The state already believes it was bad enough to justify that label before a single new charge has even been filed.
There's also Another little tidbit of information here, very interesting and very important bit of information regarding Elizabeth Ciders. The prosecutor says that she's already facing these 16 charges of child endangering, and these are F2s. And that includes causing, basically serious harm to a child. It's neglect, not providing a safe environment, causing serious physical harm, things of that nature. But he's saying when this goes to grand jury, he's going to ask the grand jurors to indict her on new charges. So that makes me think this is in addition to those 16 child endangering charges. What does that say to you? Because I don't know what other charges. My mind is spinning. What other charges could Elizabeth Ciders face aside from child endangering?
Well, that was the most striking thing in the memo that the state filed opposing reduction in bond. And I think it's showing some cards to the public as well as to defense counsel that, look, you're looking at child endangering cases, but there's more coming and it's more serious. And that is also why she might try and flee. And that's also why she might try and reach her children to talk to them, to influence them one way or another in what their statements may be in relating to the endangering children, but any other offenses that may have occurred while they're locked in this small room for many years. The key to this, I think, is, among other things, is it's long going. It wasn't just one discrete child endangering where a mother burned a child on the arm, and that's the basis for the single child endangering. This went on for years where they weren't sent to school, where they were locked up, that they weren't allowed out, that their life was very much restricted. All those things add up to an equation of a long standing neglect and abuse that below the radar should add up to something more than what we
Now
know.
here's the part that should make your blood boil, if it hasn't already. Vinton County isn't asking for temporary custody while this plays out. They're going straight for permanent custody, skipping the step where they usually try to work toward reunification, skipping right past it entirely, which tells you something the court filings won't say outright. The state has already decided, in its own mind, that these children are never going home.
Judge Rogers has already ordered a competency evaluation for Elizabeth Ciders at the request of her lawyer. The evaluation will also include an evaluation to determine whether Elizabeth Ciders has a mental illness that would make her not guilty by reason of insanity. Tommy Stolley had said previously that Elizabeth Ciders wants to be released from jail so she can be reunited with her children, but that seems highly unlikely to happen anytime soon. Vinton County is actually seeking permanent custody of the children.
Not to mom, not to dad, not to grandma, not to grandpa. Ever. And you already know what that means if you've followed cases like this before. That's not a decision the state makes lightly. That's a decision made when investigators have seen something that goes past poverty, past neglect, into territory a whole lot darker. Because here's what the defense keeps saying publicly, that this family was just poor, just living in extreme poverty. Kids not enrolled in school because the family couldn't manage it, moving around to dodge children's services because they were scared, not because they were hiding something worse. And look, poverty is real, and poverty gets criminalized in this country in ways it shouldn't. We all know that. But 18 years, 16 children, a total absence from any school system, and a prosecutor now hinting at additional serious felonies. That story stops adding up as just poverty somewhere around child number 10.
I don't know what other charges she could be facing. I don't want to speculate here, but I think that, it goes without saying. The prosecutor's already publicly said, these children were hidden. I mean, he said that to the county commissioners in a meeting. They were the hidden children of Omer Street. He likes that a TV station calls them that. And the county is seeking permanent custody. There's not going to be any reunification. If the county is saying to the courts, we're seeking permanent custody of these children, I think that is signaling that this is incredibly serious and reunification is unlikely.
I think you're exactly correct. This case, uh, ordinarily, this kind of case, even though this is a case of its own, uh, exclusive kind, a case like this starts with a request for temporary custody to children's
Correct.
services, either on an emergency basis or otherwise. And then you do an investigation, you see what you have, and then you look at the family unit and look at relatives or others that the child might be placed at. But here they're starting off right from the get go, seeking permanent custody, which, again, as you say, says to everyone concerned that we don't think reunification with the parents of these children, the way they've been treated, is ever going to be in the best interest of those children.
And that's the legal standard in the state of Ohio, is the best interest of the child. It is in most states, I believe. What is in the best interest of the child? And there must be some evidence that we are not privy to that is goes beyond these are just poor people living in extreme poverty, because that's what a couple of the defense attorneys have said thus far. They're just poor. They're living in extreme poverty. Uh, Ron, they're not in school. They're not going to school. They're moving around to avoid children's services. Does this not signal to you that this goes beyond just being impoverished?
Certainly, certainly. I think there's very much information below the radar that we don't know yet, but we will find out when the case goes to court that would indicate that the state believes that no time in the future should mom or dad or their grandparents have access to these children that have been so neglected for so many years.
This is the part of the story nobody wants to say out loud, so I'll say it. There's a difference between a family that fell through the cracks of a broken system and a family that built its own walls specifically so the system could never find the cracks in the first place. One of those is a tragedy. The other is a crime. And right now, the evidence, the actual, documented, filed in court evidence, is starting to point toward the second one. Christina Ciders, the grandmother, is fighting the same battle for release. But notice what's missing from the prosecutor's opposition to her bond. He didn't mention any new charges coming for her. Only 2 reasons instead of 3, which tells you something too. It suggests that in the eyes of investigators, Elizabeth and her husband may be viewed as the primary actors here, with Grandma and Grandpa playing a more passive role, present in the house, maybe complicit through silence, but maybe not the ones who built the cage.
He is Grandma, and Grandma is in jail under the same bail conditions, and her lawyer has also asked that she receive a bail modification and be released on bail, GPS monitor, etc. As it stands right now, all of them have to post like $300,000 or at least a portion of that with a surety or something to that effect, and then wear a GPS monitor. As you stated earlier, those can routinely be manipulated, cut off, and honestly, you can cut off a GPS monitor and it might send an alert, and somebody might not even see it for a day or two, correct?
Yes, that frequently will happen, at least here in Franklin County. The systems that they use, as soon as it is cut off, it sends an alert to the pretrial release program that then will contact victims and counsel and say that the GPS has been disrupted. But I don't know what kind of system they may have down there. But more than that, the GPS is not monitored in real time. It is kind of like a look back. If it gets cut off, or if she would attempt to contact the children or go somewhere she shouldn't go, if there's restrictions on her movement, they aren't seeing that until they look for it, and that's one of the difficulties that typically occurs. You can put them in a certain restrictive zone, but unless they're going to give her house arrest, so to speak, where they could put it within 100 yards of the location where she's going to be staying, and then it would be programmed to alert the probation department or pretrial release. But absent that kind of restriction, then yeah, can't monitor it in real time. And often somebody with a ankle monitor will be out committing new crimes, and it's good evidence to prosecute them for the new crimes, but you don't have a real-time monitoring to observe or prevent the crimes.
Mhm.
We don't know for certain. Nobody does yet, not even us. That's the honest truth, and I'd rather tell you that than pretend I've got answers I don't have.
First, I want to bring in Ron O'Brien. He is the former prosecutor of Franklin County, Ohio. That's in Columbus, Ohio, to the north of Vinton County. Ron, thanks so much for coming back on.
Oh, very glad to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. I'm really interested in your thoughts on this prosecutor, William Archer, coming out after all of these weeks, weeks and weeks after these requests for bail modifications were filed, and saying, we oppose any bail modification for these three reasons. And the first reason being, one of the three reasons he gave for Elizabeth Ciders, at least, was the fact that the issue of her competency has been raised. What do you make of that?
What we do know is this. A grand jury is coming, likely before Labor Day based on the standard 60-day clock these cases run on in Ohio.
And then we also have the competency issue that William Archer writes about, that basically she's at personal risk until her competency is known, because that's been raised by her counsel.
Right, and at least in terms of competency, they want to be assured that she's not a risk of harm to herself or to others, and that is something that would be looked into during the competency exam. And so, at this point, I can see why they are saying, "Look, let's look at this. There's competency issues. There's flight risk. There's a potential harm to the victims. All this together." Let's just keep her in jail until we see where we are. I'm interested to see how soon they may take it to the grand jury, because they typically have 60 days from the time it's bound over to the grand jury, and they've already consumed, probably a month maybe. In any event, they need to start getting the case together to present to the grand jury. And at that point, we will see what additional charges that have been waved around are included in the indictment.
Ron, you read my mind, because that was going to be my next question to you. When do you see this case going to grand jury? Because it's been quite a bit of time now. Is this a case where maybe they only want to go once? They don't want to have to go back to the grand jury, on a continuing basis?
I think that's exactly right. I think they want to have what they are going to proceed on included in the single indictment against all defendants, and include all counts against each individual defendant. And they have a clock, at least under the rules of superintendents, of 60 days from the time a case is bound over from municipal court to common pleas court. And in this case, they're probably close to 40 anyhow, and or more. And so at this point in time, I would think that it should go to the grand jury probably before Labor Day.
Well, we shall see, because we're all watching that calendar, and we'll see what happens. Ron O'Brien, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, as
When it
always.
convenes, we're finally going to learn what those mystery charges are. And whatever they turn out to be, they're going to answer the one question hanging over this entire case right now. Was Elizabeth Ciders the one who trapped 16 children inside that house for nearly 2 decades? Or was she trapped right alongside them, just old enough that nobody thought to ask? This case isn't over. It's not close to over. And something about that image of her standing there uncuffed while everyone else in her family wore chains, it stuck with me in a way most of these cases don't. I don't have a clean answer for you tonight. I wish I did. So I'm asking you directly. When that grand jury hands down whatever's coming, who do you think is going to be sitting on the wrong side of it? Is Elizabeth Ciders the monster in this house of horrors? Or is she the last victim nobody's counted yet? Tell me in the comments. Because this family's story isn't finished, and neither is ours.